Hello everyone, my name is Osama Al Kurdi. I do apologize. I have a sore throat, so my voice is not in its optimum. Today I will talk to you about a topic that very close to my heart, which is the impact of culture on emergency management. Uh, the content of my presentation talks about definition of culture, culture artifacts, and then I have a good concept that related to disaster management, which is livelihood, and then culture and disasters, and how we integrate culture into disaster management. So, what is culture? A lot of researchers agree that it is a very difficult to define. Uh, a lot of people look at it from a different ways and different views. Some describe it as values of people, others describe it as a way of life. Uh, some of them explain it as a toolkit with values and beliefs and knowledge. Hofstede, one of the Dutch psychologists, that a guru of the culture, social science, describe it as a collective programming of the mind that distinguish group of people or individuals from others. Having talked a little bit about culture, so what are the components of any culture out there? A lot of the study shows that there is two types, material and non-material. While material has to do with clothing, crafts, and buildings like Taj Mahal, non-material uh, describe symbols, rules of behavior, language, values, and norms, and family pattern. In the literature, what I found is that uh, these cultural artifacts are really related to the concept of risk and livelihood specifically. So it is culture is associated with livelihood, which is uh, basically it is the capabilities and activities for means of living and survival during disasters. Societies rely on traditions to survive, knowledge, beliefs, skills. Uh, Therefore, culture is closely linked with societal risk management. In my next slide, we'll talk about how culture and disasters are related. Uh, a lot of the socio-cultural settings affect how groups respond to disasters. Uh, Although a lot of practitioners and researchers agree that culture is very important for disaster readiness, they often neglected. It's often neglected by government, NGOs, and aid agencies. However, failing to address these cultural aspects lead to more vulnerable communities. Culture can have a positive or negative influence on readiness, and here we will give a little bit of examples. There is a group of an Indonesian community called the Javanese. We found them to live near volcano and slopes. Someone could ask why they are selecting or they chose to live there. However, when we dig a little bit deeper, we understand that they provide offerings to the volcano as part of their uh, heritage or beliefs. On the other side, we have a positive uh, example where the Moken, which is in Thailand, when they are living in a tsunami area, the Indian Ocean area, they usually survive some of the tsunamis because they identify an early warning system for them, which is the behavior of their animals. So that explains why they survived, and some of the tourists sometimes they do not survive. So it is obviously indicating the or linking the inherited knowledge can be a positive effect on disaster as well. So knowing how important is culture and cultural artifacts in disaster management, how do we integrate culture into emergency management or disaster management from an international perspective? There is good practices out there. The Department of Health in the US, they introduced culture competency for their field people or their people to be trained at. We can engage the community and community leaders, especially internationally, in all phases, not only the response phase that we discussed in this course. That will establish trust, uh, considering their knowledge, the community or the local community knowledge versus the expert and predictable knowledge used by computers and science will help also empower the local communities. Language issues, use communication, translation to communicate risks and disaster readiness. training of first responders and field people, especially for international aid efforts, understanding critical issues like poverty, stereotyping, ethnicity issues that will really enable the field people or emergency managers understanding the way the local community behave the way they do and prepare them to deal with disasters later on, during, and after in the recovery phase. To conclude, we can um, argue that culture is very important to individuals and societies. Disaster management is linked to culture aspects, and all these elements, they are associated with livelihood, which means of living and survival. Therefore, we need to integrate culture aspect into disaster management as much as you can, uh, uh, namely or particularly integrating local knowledge that would really help and empower those communities. I think this will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. I look for your comments and to provide some comments of others.